that I do.
Sorry, yeah.
I should mention that I tell it like it is. So I hope that's not going to offend anybody.
I sure hope not. Well, welcome everyone, and happy Climate Week and Earth Day to those who are participating in the festivities this week. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Claire, and I'm the program manager here at Climate Farm School. We started this monthly speaker series and hope to connect and grow our growing community and build out our library of conversations, exploring the nexus between planetary health, agricultural health, and human health. And I'm very excited to have Dr. Ann Lopez here to talk today about a critical sector of this conversation, and that is the realities of being a farm worker. So Anne is the executive director at the Center for Farmworker Families, which is a really inspiring organization that is working to educate about the challenges faced in farm worker communities and support these communities through some amazing projects and policy advocacy work. Anne has also done a remarkable amount of research on the binational circuit and continues to explore and promote research surrounding farm worker health. So today, Anne will be sharing her work at the Center for Farmworker Families and discuss some of these farm worker realities that I mentioned. And I know I'm excited to hear from her. There'll be some time after her presentation for questions, so please feel free to drop them in the chat as we go. I'd love to hear from all of you as well. And with that, I will pass it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anne.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here on a very important day, Earth Day. We all need to involve ourselves with protecting the planet because it's in imminent danger at the moment with some of the activities that are happening politically. So I would like to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and that is the farm workers whom I've worked with and been part of the community of both in this country and also in Mexico for many, many years. And so I'll start with kind of a historical perspective. And that is if we go back 7,000 to 9,000 years, we find that farm workers invented over time an intercrop called the corn, bean, and squash intercrop, and found that if they grew those three crops together, they would get much higher yields of corn than if they grew the corn separately or in a monoculture. And so over time, over all those years, 7,000 to 9,000 years, this corn, bean, and squash intercrop, which is completely sustainable, supported farm worker communities all over Latin America. And it did so up till actually fairly recently into the 1990s, actually. Then what happened is in the early 90s, the World Trade Organization got formed, and they decided that the way farmers in Mexico were growing corn was, quote, inefficient, and that the US, which at the time had corn superiority in the world, the US should grow the corn for Mexico and send the corn to Mexico. And the farmers on small rural farms in Mexico should be forced to leave their farms and go north and become part of the labor force in the maquiladoras or the manufacturing sector at the border. So, of course, nobody consulted with the farmers who'd been on this land for thousands of years, but that was the thinking. And in the past, we tried to get corn into Mexico from the US, but we weren't successful because the border is kind of tariff driven. In other words, if you're a farmer and you load up your truck full of corn and drive to the border to sell it in Mexico, you'll get stopped and charged an inordinate fee, and you'll realize you can't make a profit, and so you'll turn around and come back to the US. And in this way, Mexico protected its rural farmers and protected this sustainable farming process. The other interesting thing is that over all of these thousands of years, as farmers grew this corn, bean, and squash intercrop in Mexico, excuse me, they hand selected the corn that was the best after every harvest and saved it to plant the following year. So over thousands of years, this corn became perfectly adapted to whatever environment it was in. And so there was a genetic fusion between the environment and the corn crop. And in this way, Mexico became the corn repository for corn genetics in the world. So if you were in a country anywhere in the world and had sick corn, you could go to Mexico and find an environment similar to the one that you live in and take your corn to Mexico, cross it with the Mexican corn, and that usually solved the problem. So it was very critical to maintain this precious reservoir of genetics for the world, because there's only 3 crops that support all of humanity, right? Rice, wheat, and corn. So protecting the corn was key. Again, the unfortunate thing in my mind is that the US decided that we should be the one to supply the corn. And of course, the corn that we would supply to Mexico is genetically modified or hybridized. So there aren't really any pure strains of corn from the US that we have to offer Mexico. And the big problem, of course, was the tariffs at the border. So the prevailing economic system at the time was the neoliberal economy. And there are 4 pillars to the neoliberal economy. Number 1 is, excuse me, deregulation. And we see that everywhere. I mean, I'm just appalled really by the amount of deregulation. You've heard of Roundup or glyphosate, and there are billions of dollars of lawsuits charging Monsanto Bayer with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as a result of working with Roundup. And yet, today, if you go in a Home Depot store, you will find Roundup still on the shelves. This is deregulation. We've seen it with microplastics. Scientists know that microplastics are now in everybody's brain, but no one has studied what it does to the brain. So again, deregulation. You've heard of the PFAS, the forever chemicals. Forever chemicals are everywhere. And again, they cause damage to people's health. And yet, because of deregulation, they're still out there. And the goal of the neoliberal economy is to maximize profits at any cost. The second pillar is privatization. So the idea then is to take any items or locations that are in the public trust and privatize them so that a billionaire could buy up a state park and charge inordinate fees to get in and become even richer. Again, the idea is maximizing profits. The third pillar is to get rid of public services. So, for instance, when I was a kid, I went to a elementary school in Southern California, and the teachers had everything. They had books, they had paper, they had crayons, they had anything these kids needed, they had. There was no spending their own money after class for supplies. It was all supplied. And the neoliberal economy, the goal is to get rid of the public services. And we're seeing a transition educationally from basically free school, free elementary school, to charter schools, and ultimately to private schools. So at some point, people that can't afford elementary education may not be able to get it. And then finally, the last pillar is to blame the poor. So if the poor cannot make it in this economy and are stuck out in a tent by the side of the road, that's their own fault. So what you do is blame them. And we see that every day in the papers, right? Does anybody open a paper and not see issues about homeless people? When I was a kid in LA, there was no homelessness that I ever was aware of. There was Skid Row in LA where drug addicts would go to do their thing, but there wasn't this thing of sidewalks full of tents and people having no place to go to live. And finally, I should say that the neoliberal economy is very dependent on exploited labor. So that is in a nutshell, the neoliberal economy. And so given that and the fact that we wanted to get our corn into Mexico, we had to do something about NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And the whole idea of the free trade agreement is to get rid of the tariffs at the border. That was the goal. And so unknown people, they're not available to know who they are, created a system where over a 15-year period, they would phase out the tariffs, and this would give the farmers in Mexico on these rural farms time to go somewhere else to find employment. That was the thinking. In fact, I was in Mexico 30 months after this went into effect, and all the tariffs were gone in that short period of time. And people had no idea what happened. I would ask people, well, what happened? And they'd say, oh, it's a problem with the government. And the price of gas, I think, doubled during that time. So it was a period of lots of chaos. And in the meantime, US corn starts pouring into Mexico. It undercuts the price that these rural farmers had always expected from their crops. And during that time, people lost their livelihood. People on the farm had no way to make money because their crops weren't of value anymore since the US corn was so much cheaper. So they started leaving the farms or staying and expecting nothing really in return. Some of the families, I talked to 2 out of, I think, 30 families I studied, and 2 of the families decided to stay on their farms. They weren't going to leave. They've been there for thousands of years. And if they starved to death, well, that was just too bad. It was very sad. Another option for people was to go to a big city and try to find employment there and send money home to the farm to survive. And if you go to Mexico City or Guadalajara, but especially Mexico City, and if you go up in a plane, you can't see where the city ends. You can't see a point where there's mountains beyond the city. It's just basically shanty towns as far as the eyes can see, and full of these displaced farmers. And finally, a whole group of people in Mexico leaving their farms made the undocumented border crossings to the US to become farm workers in agriculture. Now, when they got here, of course, they're undocumented. So most of the farm workers we have in the state, there's up to 500,000, we don't know exactly how many. Most of them are undocumented and what I call economic refugees of NAFTA. Now, you don't hear about any of this. I mean, if you read the news will tell you that they're here for a better life, or they're here to carve out a new life that's better or whatever. And actually, that has nothing to do with it. They're there to survive, to not starve. And so almost all the farmers that came up during that time to make their new homes in the US, again, were undocumented and trying to escape starvation for themselves and their family. Okay, so that's the background. Now let's look at what's going on today. I'm going to give you some good news, or I'll start with the bad news and we'll move into the good news. Most of the nearly 500,000 migrant farm workers in our state are undocumented. And I mentioned I call them economic refugees of NAFTA. They have no rights, and at present they're being hunted by ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We have what I think of as a caste system in this state, where we've got farm workers who are the lower caste, and they work as exploited laborers to supply food for the rest of us. So they're a very strong underclass. The setup is perfect for growers, because growers have always wanted a docile workforce that they didn't have to worry too much about, or that didn't give them any trouble. Like during the Cesar Chavez era, most of those workers were actually documented, so they had rights, and the growers would have to kind of be on pins and needles about it because they didn't want to violate the law. But these new workers coming in from Mexico have no rights, and they can't really defend themselves. And all a grower has to do is threaten deportation or blacklisting statewide, and the farm workers will do whatever they say. And there's no oversight on the farms. Between 40 and 60% of women farm workers are sexually harassed, groped, or outright raped in the field. So there's nobody out there watching to make sure these violations don't happen. They live in poverty with wages amounting to an average of only $25,000 a year. And in Central California, nobody can live on that. They often lack basic necessities and a decent place to live. And research in 2018 found that we are 45,560 housing units short of adequate farm worker housing that would house 90,000 workers. About 89% of farm workers are renters, with an average of 4.5 people per bathroom. 16% sleep in living rooms and outbuildings. And among renters, 54% take in extra tenants to try to increase the rent so they can pay the rent. A Santa Clara County study found that 700 more units are needed to house year-round farm workers, and 1,400 units are needed for migrant farm workers. So we have a desperate lack of housing, sufficient housing for farm workers. And one of the most disturbing aspects of their lives, in my opinion, is the incidence of anomalies that many struggle with, especially the children. These include brain cancer, bone cancer, leukemia, ADHD, autism, learning disabilities, and the list goes on and on. This is just, these anomalies are rampant in the Watsonville area. The pediatric cancer rate for children from birth to age 14 is the second highest in Santa Cruz County of all, the second highest in Santa Cruz County of all counties in the state, according to the National Cancer Institute. At 22.5 childhood cancers per 100,000 children, the rate of cancer in Santa Cruz County is more than 38% above the overall California rate of 16.3%. The high use of pesticides linked to childhood cancers is likely the contributor to this horrific harm to children. The UCLA Fielding School of Public Health has identified 13 pesticides correlated with the onset of childhood cancer between birth and age 5 when the mother lived within 2.5 miles of the pesticide applications while pregnant. Since 2018, a consistent 1 million pounds of pesticides have been applied in Santa Cruz County every year. A record 67% of them are fumigant gases that can travel for miles. For instance, one of the worst and most potent is a carcinogen 1,3-dichloropropene called talone. Talone can drift 7 miles. That's all of Watsonville. So that means if you live in Watsonville and your window happens to be open when they're spraying, it'll be almost impossible for you not to be impacted. 98.5% of pesticides associated with childhood leukemia and 95.2% of pesticides tied to childhood brain cancer were applied in the Watsonville area alone. Compared to any other county in the state, Monterey County has the higher percentage of schools and students in areas with the greatest pesticide use, affecting 29 schools and 18,525 students. In Monterey County, ranches and farms applied over 2 million pounds of chlorpicrin, which is a toxic air contaminant, and over 700,000 pounds of 1,3-dichloropropene, the carcinogen, in 2021. And the lifetime cancer risk at Ohlone Elementary School continues to be twice OEHA's threshold, or Organization of Environmental Health Hazard Assessments threshold. In general, Latino school children are 3.2 times more likely than white students to attend schools with the highest use of the most hazardous pesticides. The disparity is most notable in the Pajaro Valley. Talone, or 1,3-dichloropropene, a potent carcinogen, has been banned in 34 countries. So the question is, why do we still use it? This is an example of environmental racism. The same situation would never occur in a predominantly white, wealthy region where you have 3.2% of kids getting a cancer. I mean, it's disgraceful. Okay, so now we can go to some good news. Are you ready for good news?
Yes, please.
Valerie Bingle, a physician specializing in family and community medicine with expertise in environmental health in Salinas and the Pajaro Valley for more than 4 decades, recommends that prevention is the only real remedy. Pesticides must be phased out, period, and industrial farming practices traded for organic production and regenerative agriculture. So get rid of the stuff. a group of us met with Monterey County Agricultural Commissioner Juan Hidalgo. We explained our concern about childhood exposure to these pesticides. This after writing him several letters requesting that he consider other means of controlling pests. And I felt that most of our concerns were not taken seriously. And the next day, Earth Justice filed a lawsuit against the commissioner for not protecting the children from hazardous pesticides and promoting the use of less harmful pesticides. So now we're getting the law in the picture. And a group of professors and attorneys at UC Irvine are working on a civil rights lawsuit against the state of California for allowing the use of so many damaging pesticides in the state. Now, I'm not sure if you know the organization or agency that's supposed to control pesticide use in California, and that's the Department of Pesticide Regulation, which is an agency under the auspices of the Environmental Protection Agency in California. However, do you know where their funding comes from? If you guess the agrochemical companies, you're correct. So obviously there's a real conflict of interest. Now there is or the DPR, Department of Pesticide Regulation, started a new program called Spray Days. And anybody can go online and look up a location and find out what pesticides are being sprayed in the location. The problem is it doesn't give precise geographic points. So you can find within a 1 square mile what pesticides will be sprayed in that quadrant, but you can't find what farm in that quadrant or area specifically the pesticides will be sprayed in. So that's basically where we're at with pesticides. And there's more and more people coming out saying we need to get rid of them, just like Valerie Bengal. Now, another one that's good news relates not to just general farms in California, but to the 24 migrant camps where migrants can live from usually April to October, November. And in the past, when they had to move out of their units, and they had to move 50 miles away. The 50-mile regulation, it's called. And the problem with the 50-mile regulation is that their children then would have to enroll in another school. So the children would go to at least 2 schools a year. Some kids that I met went to 4 schools in 2 countries in 2 different languages. And over time, they would fall further and further behind in their academic work and eventually drop out and join gangs or become farm workers themselves, which their parents didn't want. Their parents work hard in the field so they can have a different life. So that's a concern. And Joaquin Arambula in Northern California introduced a bill in the Assembly to get rid of the 50-mile regulation. And I personally went to Sacramento on 7 different occasions and asked the question, what is the purpose of the 50-mile regulation? And no one ever gave me an answer. So the bill then put this before the Assembly, and fortunately it passed. So now we no longer have a 50-mile regulation, thank goodness. The only thing is the units that people live in are really not up to standard. And so we're hoping to introduce another bill to acquire funds to renovate them so people can move into these camps and stay year round, because it's some of the only affordable, decent housing. So what you people are doing by listening to all of this is that you are taking a step in the direction of the transformation of unsustainable agriculture in this state that makes people sick, and reforming it and transforming it to organic regenerative. Before I conclude, I would like to, how many of you have been working on taxes? Because what I hear a lot about is how undocumented immigrants don't pay taxes. Well, here's a different perspective. In 2022, 10.9 million undocumented immigrants paid $96.7 billion in taxes. Combined, they contributed more than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and 66 mega corporations. While the ultra wealthy and Fortune 500 hide behind loopholes and offshore havens, undocumented workers in this country, barred from many public benefits, including Social Security, are propping up our economy and paying their fair share and then some. Here are the numbers. Undocumented immigrants pay a combined effective state and local tax rate of 10.1% more than the top 1%, who pay just 7.2% on average. On the federal level, they paid a higher tax rate than 5 of the richest Americans, all while working essential jobs in agriculture, construction, and healthcare. The economic injustice in the system that rewards exploitation and scapegoats the very people holding it up. So I'll conclude with a quote from Cesar Chavez. History will judge societies and governments and their institutions not by how big they are or how well they serve the rich and powerful, but by how effectively they respond to the needs of the poor and helpless. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Anne. It was such vital and crucial information, and it's clear that you've put a lot of time and work into, really engaging with these spaces. And so I know that, I definitely have a few questions, but I want to open it up first to anybody else who's curious to pick Anne's brain.
No initial questions for me. Just wanted to say a huge thank you. I really enjoyed listening to that as well. And sorry, Mahima, I saw we came off mute at the same time, so I'll go off.
No worries. I was just gonna jump in and ask Anne about, I guess, more of an open-ended question. What are your thoughts on robotics and the startups that are working on this kind of technology to replace farm workers? Yeah, just wanted to hear if you're aware of that space and what your thoughts are on that.
Well, we had kind of mechanical harvesting. When was it? 10, 15 years ago, and it just didn't pay off. It didn't work. I mean, you can't really, there's certain crops that don't lend themselves well to that, including strawberries, which are a huge money maker. And so what you need is a human brain to determine which ones to choose or whatever. And I don't think everything can be replaced with a machine or robotics. That's my own opinion. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in time it'll all be handled. I went to a restaurant last year where they used robots to serve people. So I mean, they can do that. I guess maybe there's another way. But yeah, I don't hold out much hope for that. I think we'll always need people. I think what we need to do, though, is quit exploiting them and giving them a livable wage and a contract with the grower they work for, so their wages can't be stolen, which happens regularly.
Hi, Anne. Thank you for that. Just so much information in one session. I think it's a very general question, and you've kind of hinted at this already, but from like maybe the perspective of government change, what's one policy you see that would make real impact? And then as a follow-on from more of just, as an everyday consumer who cares about this, what is anything we could do that might make an impact?
Okay, so in other words, if we change something in the government, what would it be? Was that the question?
Yeah, that was the first question.
Yeah, the first question. Okay. Well, I personally am not a fan of the neoliberal economy. I think it benefits wealthy people. It benefits, it's it's kind of capitalism on steroids. And I think people need to matter more in the economy. You have an economy that supports people and not one that supports wealthy people. And we're seeing the extreme of that now in our government with Trump and Musk and all of their friends who are what, multi-billionaires. And I just think it's unethical to have certain people in a society that have billions literally of dollars. And then the people I see, the farm workers who worry about where food is coming from or how they're going to get clothing, etc. We're supposed to be a democracy. And I don't think a democracy would support a few billionaires with the bottom rungs just barely surviving. So that's my personal opinion. And I've just seen, to be honest with you, I have seen too much suffering among farm workers, unnecessary suffering. Mostly from lack of, like not enough food. I remember visiting a family and a Oaxacan indigenous family, and the parents and I sat and conversed. Well, the two little girls and their children were crying and crying. And I finally stopped the conversation and I said, "Why are they crying?" "Because they're hungry." And I said, "Well, give them something to eat." Then they said, "Well, we don't have any money, so we can't buy any food." And I said, "Well, we're not going to do this. You're going to have food." And so I called the food bank. I found out the whole community was hungry. All these kids were hungry. And so we started the food bank that afternoon, brought out food for 144 families. And then we started what we call distributions, where once a month on the second Friday of every month, we offer a distribution where the food bank brings out food for all people who sign up. So we don't have hunger. I mean, is it offensive to you, or is it just me too, or to me rather, or is it to you too, that farm workers would be hungry? Give me and you know what break. I mean, the people that harvest our food are hungry. Hello. So I think we need real transformation. And one would be to make sure that the people that feed us have basic needs met, like food for their children. Forgive my rant. I obviously have a lot of passion behind that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I asked for. So thank you. Those are good ideas.
there. Sorry that I was not on video. I was in transit, but thank you so much. This was incredibly insightful. I'm just now getting into the world of farming and agriculture, but I've always been obsessed with food waste as a concept. So wanted to hear from you with your experience more from the lens of agriculture, where you see the biggest uh, place that we can have impact on the world of food waste, both as a person and then as an overall system.
I'll be honest with you and say that I've never really studied the food waste issue. I know, I think I read somewhere that we throw away a third of all the food that we produce, which is ridiculous. So there ought to be some program that is studying this and making certain that all of the excess food that's still good is recovered and distributed to farm worker communities. I mean, at the very least, yeah, I mean, that kind of food waste during a time and in populations that don't have enough food, it's immoral, it's unethical in my mind. So I think there needs to be researchers looking into this and finding and suggesting solutions.
Absolutely. And it's 100% a logistical
Yeah,
problem at that point. There's also better practices more upstream that can prevent this. But of course, I mean, the farm community and 1 in 9 Americans go hungry. So
one
it's
in nine
the
America, 1 in 9 Americans.
report
Yeah.
food insecurity on a
Oh
regular
my
basis.
God. I mean, that's just completely, it's unethical. It's immoral. Yeah, and while
Yeah,
we're throwing away a third of the food, I mean, it's
it doesn't make
absurd.
sense. Yep.
Exactly. A lot of work to do in this area.
A lot of people working on it, thankfully, like
Oh, good,
yourself.
good. Like to hear that. There is a different way.
Hi, Dr. Ann. Sorry, I joined the call a bit late because I'm in the middle of my workday, but I really wanted to hear you talk and hear what you had to say. I think my question is more about, do you think there would ever be a scenario where a grower would take responsibility to advocate or want to even advocate for the workers on their farms? Or do you think that, the margins are already too thin, so that's not something they really care about, or there is access to enough labor where, again, that's not something they really need to think about, because if it's not this set of people, there's always another set of people that are available where you can still negotiate and pay them the least amount of wages? So yeah, is there any, like, I don't know, incentive or any scenario where you see the growers kind of taking responsibility for at least some part of it?
I do. In Santa Cruz County, just listening to you speak right now, I can think of 2 growers that are really good with their farm workers and pay them well and give them a decent life. I think one of them, at one point, Dick Pichot, he has the most successful organic vegetable uh, farm production, I think, in the country. And he used to be a conventional farmer, and then he shifted. Um, and then there's another one, his name is escaping me at the moment, but he used to be a farm worker, and he's very cognizant of the problems. And so he's also very good with his farm workers. So I think it has to become a trend, where people realize that treating farm workers like beasts of burden that aren't valuable and just using them up. I mean, the way it's set up, it's like you work a worker to death or expose them to enough pesticides. Eventually they die at an average age of 49 to 51 years. You sweep them under the rug and bring in more for the same from Mexico. I mean, you know, this is no way to treat human beings. And I think that ultimately enough of us at the grassroots level need to rise up and demand change and just quit buying whatever the person's selling. Right now in Santa Cruz County, there's a what do you call it? A protest, a day of reckoning, whatever you want to call it, with Driscoll berry farms. And there were, you know, Dolores Huerta has been invited. I mean, it's quite an event that's being planned. And I think that exposing people that are abusive and are just in it for the money at any cost to the workers, I think that is critical.
Thank you. That at least, yeah, feels like there's some hope.
Yes, yes, but it has to come from the grassroots. It never comes from the top down. It has to be from the bottom up. Right.
And I know you spoke a little bit about some of the current projects that's going on at the Center for Farmworker Families, like the 50-mile regulation is really interesting. I wanted to ask a little bit about the CORA campaign, the campaign for organic and regenerative ag, and ask about your thoughts on like what the role of organic and regenerative agriculture is in farm worker advocacy.
Well, let's see, to address the last point, we need we need that kind of advocacy just so farm workers survive. If they're out in the field every day getting sprayed, I mean, I've had farm workers call me from the field saying that we're out picking whatever, and it's between 100 and 108 degrees, and people are fainting, and the supervisor won't let us go. And ultimately, some people faint and end up being taken to the hospital. I mean, this should be illegal. Whoever is doing this, you know, I mean, this is murder, really, or could be murder. So I think that we need to protect farm workers so they can continue to work for us. And also, again, this is just no way to treat human beings. You know, where are our ethics? Where are our standards? People that go to church, you know, where is the calling to do something to prevent harm to others? You know, I mean, really, that's how I see it.
Absolutely. And I think there is so much about these more regenerative and agricultural and organic agricultural practices that really do have a lot more just kind of baseline protections in place. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about the work being done for the CORA campaign and where it stands now.
Yeah, well, we're waiting to hear from Dolores Huerta for our event that we're going to have May 10th. I think it's May 10th. And where we're going to have a protest and speakers about Driscoll's associates and their basically lack of concern for farm worker well-being. And that's really what organic regenerative agriculture results in, is advocacy for farm worker well-being and ultimately for well-being for all of us. You know, we don't want pesticides on our food. I read one time that one single conventional strawberry can have as many as 35 pesticides on it. My goodness, if you ate a whole bowl of that, it'd be a miracle if you survived, you know. So we want clean food, whether we're farm workers or not. Clean food for everybody. They did it. They survived for thousands of years, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. Why can't we continue to do that? And I have read, a good one is the Rodale Institute study, where they studied organic agriculture and said that, and I'm not sure they included the regenerative at the time, but if we converted all industrial agriculture to sustainable organic agriculture overnight, we could feed everybody on the planet. So the question becomes, why aren't we doing that? You know, I mean, that's what we need, not more pesticides, more chemicals, more non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, more leukemia, more brain cancer. I mean, this is disgraceful. Why is it even legal? Why can you do this to children? I don't get it. So I'm not the person to come to for that. I say get rid of all the chemicals, use the, the information we know that works for sustainable agriculture, and continue to expand the knowledge.
Yeah. I was also curious because you did mention this kind of now and in the beginning of your talk, this process by which people were kind of genetically preserving and selecting for this like adaptation in corn varietals in Mexico. I'm
Right.
curious if that work is still being done there and if you see any of that work still being done in California or in the US.
Well, in terms of Mexico, they've made tremendous progress. In 2013, a federal judge banned all genetically modified corn, claiming it was an imminent threat to the environment, quote unquote. And then this new woman president, Claudia Sheinbaum, now she's saying get rid of all of those strains. We're not going to have any of the US GMO corn enter the country. And what they're doing now, from what I understand, is taking seeds from the food banks, not the food banks, I'm sorry, the seed banks, and planting those to replace the corn, the genetic strains that we once had that are pure. So the idea then is to repopulate Mexico with these strains to have it back to the way it was, and to keep US corn, GMO corn, and pesticides out of the country, which is wonderful. Finally, finally. It was just so sad when I used to take trips to Mexico, and the corn for the farmers there at the time just was not worth anything. And, you know, they were desperately trying to plant other things to make a profit, etc. And when all the time, the whole time, they already had the solution. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any last minute questions before
Well, I have another good news that just came through. And this is in Half Moon Bay. You may have heard of the shooting there. And the governor went down and saw the squalid housing situation in the area. And now we have 47 unit Stone Pine Cove project aims to improve living conditions on the coast. And they're setting this up specifically for farm workers in the area. And this is one of the manufactured homes. I don't know if you can see it, that they're going to put in place for farm workers. So finally, somebody noticed that farm workers might need better housing. Yay.
Very exciting. Give a little bit of space for anybody who has any last minute questions.
Well, I can also tell you, in addition to distributions of food every month, we do farm worker reality tours. And our first one of the season is Sunday. And we're taking, I think it's 33 people to 3 different locations to hear the farm workers' stories. from the farm workers themselves. So we go to 3 different locations, including the migrant camp, and people tell their stories, and it's much more impactful to hear it from a farm worker, and then we translate. And the other thing we do is offer computer classes and give farm workers the computer as they learn.
It's amazing.
Do you do those tours virtually?
No, no, we don't actually. Where are you located?
I'm in New York.
Where?
New York.
Oh, New York. That's a bit far. We'll come
It's a
fly
little
out
far,
here-
yeah.
fly out here and be with us. We'd love to
Yeah, I
have you.
mean, I think there's nothing like in person, so I don't necessarily, that's the real experience, but it would be interesting, like, I, I mean, if you wanted to bring like computer vision into it, or make it a what do they call, like and now it's slipping my mind, like using the Google goggles to
The Oculus.
Oculus, but what is it? It's called not
Virtual
AI,
reality.
Oh, a
VR.
yeah.
VR. Yeah, I feel like I've been talking about everything but VR lately.
Well,
Yeah,
if
you
you
could do a
go on
VR
our
version.
if you go on our website, we have lots of photos about the farm worker reality tours. So
Okay,
go on
awesome.
farmworkerfamily.org and go to events, and I guess it's photos. I don't maintain the website, but we have a photographer that takes lots of pictures and puts them on the website. So that might help.
Awesome.
Well, Anne, thank you so much for sharing such valuable and extensive information with us. Your career and dedication to the farm worker experience is truly remarkable, and I feel so grateful that you took the time to share with us today. So thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone who came to the talk today.
And thank you for inviting me.